Our guest today needs no introduction. She is known as the Enneagram Godmother. She is the reason why many of us are watching today. She co-authored the book, The Road Back to You, which catapulted the Enneagram into Protestant and Evangelical circles in 2016. The last I heard, and Suzanne maybe can speak to this, but the book has sold 750,000 copies worldwide. Suzanne is an internationally recognized Enneagram master teacher. She's conducted over 500 Enneagram workshops over the past 25 years. Suzanne received her bachelor's in social sciences from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, where she also completed additional graduate work in the schools of sociology and theology. She has served as a high school professor, the first women's basketball coach at SMU after Title IX, and as the founding director of Shared Housing, which is a social service agency there in Dallas. And when she's not on the road teaching and lecturing, Suzanne is at home with her husband, Reverend Joseph Stabile, a United Methodist pastor with whom she co-founded Life in the Trinity Ministry and the Micah Center. And she's also the mother of 4 children and the grandmother of 6. And you can find all things Suzanne at SuzanneStabile.com. She has a monthly subscription called The Table, and in there you get access to all kinds of teaching from her. You get just Q&A sessions every month, some behind the scenes Q&A sessions. So definitely go to our website and check that out if you want more access to Suzanne and her teaching. She has a couple courses on her website that are very affordable that I saw at $50. The Enneagram Stress and Security, which is 4.5 hours of teaching, and Know Your Enneagram Number, which is 6 hours of teaching. And then you might have already read these, but these are must-read books from Suzanne. So The Road Back to You, which I mentioned earlier, The Path Between Us, which is all about healthy relationships, and then her latest one, The Journey Toward Wholeness. So I have all 3 of these books. I use them as source material for when I'm writing my Enneagram devotionals, and they've been so helpful, so insightful, and yet so accessible. And also, Suzanne has a new course on Seminary Now. So if you go to seminarynow.com, she has a course called The Enneagram Journey, which is on the 9 numbers, stances, triads, passions, and everything else you can imagine. So go check that out. All right, with that introduction underway, Suzanne, I am beyond honored to have you join us on the summit. I know so many people are watching because they've been highly anticipating getting the opportunity to, grab their cup of coffee and spend some time with the Enneagram Godmother. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to update you on a couple of things. I now have 9 grandchildren.
Wow.
And we're about to have another one. And we expect in March or April that the path between us will cross the sales number of 1 million copies sold.
Wow.
So it's it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. It's probably beyond what you could have imagined.
Yeah.
That's well. So what have you been up to?
No. I made a mistake. Joel just caught me. The Road Back to You will cross 1 million copies sold. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think I said The Path, and that's not correct. I just listened to all those things you said, and I got tired thinking about all the stuff. But now I'm invigorated again and ready to go. And The Path Between Us has not sold 1 million copies almost, but The Road Back to You has.
That's great. Well, I was interviewing Sean Palmer, and he had a long list of accomplishments as a Type 3 would as well. But he said the thing to remember is I didn't do all those at the same time. You know?
Yeah. Well, I've been at this for 35 years, so I certainly didn't do it all at the same time.
So what have you been up to recently? Traveling, grandkids? We'd love to know.
Most recently, I'm working on a good deal of new content. Joe and I, my husband Joe and I, just taught Friday night and all day Saturday on change, since that's everywhere, and all the things that we're trying to deal with in the reality of ongoing change. He taught from an overview perspective, and I taught from the Enneagram perspective. And we learned a lot, and I think there'll probably be a part 2 to that. And I'm about to start teaching work that I've been working on for some time for the adoption and fostering community. I've been asked a lot over the years to teach more to that. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a first workshop, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, talking about the Enneagram and the joys and the complexities of fostering and adoption. And it's eye-opening, important thing for us all to be talking about, because there are just unbelievable numbers of children in foster care. And most foster care offices and systems are understaffed and overworked, and it's a significant problem. And I'm adopted, and our son and his husband are in the process of adopting out of the foster system, and we just have a lot of concern and hope around what we might have to say to speak into that reality that would be helpful to folks.
Beautiful. Me and my wife went through 40 hours of foster care training and then decided to do infant adoption. And so we got on the waiting list twice and adopted both of our boys that are now 12 and 9. And so adoption is a big part of our story. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. BJ and Devin intentionally wanted to adopt out of the foster system, but they are going through the Gladney home to do that, which is the training is very extensive, but it's less complicated and significantly less expensive.
Well, I really appreciate that for a number of reasons. First, because I've adopted boys, but second, it kind of shows the kind of work you're doing to integrate the Enneagram with different areas of life. And, there's Enneagram popularizers who kind of read Rezone Hudson or Palmer's, first book that came out in the late 80s and kind of, teach what they learned, but you're a theorizer. So you taking what you've learned and you've continued to build upon it and to take it into new areas of life. And we've all benefited from that. So thank you so much for not just teaching what you've learned, but also enhancing it and doing that hard work over the years. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I refer to all that you just talked about as trendy Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
There's deep spiritual wisdom Enneagram and trendy Enneagram, and both have their place, I suppose. Something will come along that will replace trendy Enneagram, but I think those of us who've been doing this work for a long time will still be teaching, and will still be teaching the depth of the wisdom that the Enneagram offers.
That's good. So what would you say is the most, in this season of life, like what are you the most thankful for, and what maybe is your biggest challenge?
In every season of life, I'm the most thankful for Joe, my husband, and my children and grandchildren. They are all such really great humans, and I find them to be very intriguing and smart, and they teach me a lot. And our children all live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So we all 19 of us are here, about to be 20. We probably get together every 5 or 6 weeks, and my children are good to each other's children, and all the little cousins really enjoy being together. It is, I guess, the piece of my life dream that came true. And I'm very thankful for my audience and for people who are interested in what you and I know has great value for us to do life better, differently, and better. And the third thing is Joe is retired now, but he wasn't ready to stop pastoring. So he's on staff at First United Methodist Church here in Dallas. And, because you've been a pastor, you never know where you're going to land when you get old. It's like, well, will we come back to this church, or will we, in the Methodist church, we're appointed by the bishop and we get moved. And we are at this season of our life, we've realized in the church that we will stay in and for the rest of our lives. And I'm very thankful to have found that. Not only do they just adore him, of course, and he belongs there, but I also feel a real sense of belonging there. And at 72 and 75, that's a really good feeling.
I loved hearing that you're most thankful for Joe and your kids and grandkids, because being in ministry, I know that, churches change, congregations change, the work of ministry changes, but your family is always there.
Yeah. I'm honestly just like a teenager in love with Joe still. I have been every day of our life together, and I still am.
That's amazing. What would be your biggest challenge right now? I mean, I can, as a two, I can maybe guess that one of your challenges is having to say no to a lot of opportunities and not being able to help everyone who comes your way. But I'll let you answer the question.
We can go with that. I've been working on boundaries since I started on a spiritual journey. So I'm about 40 years into a deep spiritual journey. I'm about 40 years into working on boundaries, and every job I've ever had required better boundaries than I have, this one included. But Joe and I are in a season actually right now, since the first of the year, where we are making some significant decisions about marking out time on our calendars quarterly that we are just not going to give away. And he's doing great at that, and I'm doing okay. And I think that our challenge is, individually and together, that we find that we are always choosing between good and good. And that's hard.
Yeah.
My sweet spot for teaching is our center, where we comfortably can seat 45 at tables. That's how we designed it, and that's what I thought I would always do. And I love traveling and speaking to larger audiences, but I'm very thankful that I can do cohorts here and sleep in my own bed and not have to travel. Travel's hard. It's a big challenge. And honestly, being 72 and embracing what I need to accept in order to continue to keep my priorities is tricky.
Well, post-COVID, I think people have gotten really used to Zoom and to being online. And so I think that's been a blessing, that the people are more comfortable with getting online, like this virtual summit.
Exactly.
Things like this didn't happen very often before that.
No. And I think it's also very honoring of the reality of different income streams and babysitters and all the things. When you're younger, you would love to do some things, but you can't. And you can't because of money sometimes, even no matter what age you are, but also because you have littles who need you at home to take care of them, or you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. And that's rare.
So, Suzanne, what is one piece of advice that you'd give someone who is just starting their Enneagram journey? Maybe they jumped on and registered for the summit and they're just getting to learn about types and subtypes and all these amazing things. You already said I love what you just said very subtly. You said, I've been on this journey of working on boundaries for 40 years. And so I think that's probably one piece of advice you'd give is to know how, what the cost is as you're jumping into this. But what is one piece of advice that you would want to give them, anyone who's starting out on the journey?
Well, you probably already know this, but I'm not a fan of any of the tests or indicators. And the reason for that is that your Enneagram number is determined by your motivation for behavior, not by behavior. And I'm certainly not a fan of a 10-question quiz, or I don't know what kind of salad you like, depending on your Enneagram number, or any of the easy ways to try to figure out something this important, I think are inadequate. And that means I think we get inadequate results. And so I think a lot of people are saying they're a certain number when they're not. But that, given the information they had to work with and the choice they had to make, they chose that number. So my number one thing is I think the Enneagram should be taught orally. And this sounds very self-serving, but in terms of a basic Enneagram Know Your Number workshop, I don't know anybody who does that better than I do. And there are other people whose work I really respect, but I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, and I know people. And I've had people, I'm still teaching the same people that I taught my first workshop to here in Dallas. And in cohorts and things that we do here at our center with 42 to 45 people, can you imagine how much they've taught me over the years? Like, they just keep on teaching me about their number, things that I would never know. So in The Path Between Us and in my last book, you'll find stories from people of different numbers. And that's because they speak better for themselves than I can speak for them. And I've learned from them the nuances that make up the number that they are. And so if you can't find a way to learn with somebody teaching it orally, then I think there are books out there that you can read. And I think The Road Back to You is really a great primer. And I didn't come to do this to sell my books or my oral teaching. I came to be with you to talk about the things that you want to talk about. But I want to offer the best that I have. Mm-hmm. And I have a really high percentage rate of people knowing their number if they hear it taught orally. And I would say that I think Rizzo and Hudson have the best indicator. Their 140 question one, I think, is the best. Anything that says you answer these questions and I can tell you your number, your wings, your subtype, that's just not true if it's going to be accurate. And there's such good Enneagram work by other people. Russ Hudson talks about virtues and passions better than I can't get close to it. He does that so well. And I think Beatrice Chestnut has a way of talking about subtypes that is exquisite. Mm-hmm. I think Richard Rohr has very heady ways of talking about the Enneagram and the Enneagram in Christian context. And I think it's unbeatable. And I think it's worth the investment if you're really interested in the Enneagram to learn from some of the old folks, I would say.
That's great. So this sort of overlaps with that answer, I think, but is there any additional advice that you'd give to Enneagram coaches, trainers, teachers, kind of the next generation of of people wanting to influence and impact others' lives with the Enneagram?
Sure. Until we had to turn down so many people because we didn't have room for them. I taught a 3-year apprenticeship program, and everybody signed up to come spend 4 long weekends with me, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, for 3 years, 4 times a year. And we replaced that with cohorts so that I could accommodate the desire of more people who wanted to come and learn from me. But what I would tell you about the apprentices is they all said, we thought after year 1, we'd be ready to do some teaching. And then we thought, well, we're not ready, but after year 2, we'll be ready. And then we realized that after year 3, we knew how much we didn't know. And I think it depends on what your motivation is if you want to teach the Enneagram. My motivation is that I want to make a meaningful contribution to the world being a better place. And I've been teaching for a long time. And I guess because I'm me, maybe because I'm a 2, people who get in touch with me who have tried to teach and it hasn't gone well say to me, you make it look so easy. But it's not easy. I've been doing it for 35 years. I'm glad I make it look easy, but I also want people, if they're going to say that they're informed by Enneagram wisdom, then I want them to be. I'm going to do a podcast later today with a friend of mine and an author who I really respect, KJ Ramsey. And she, in her bio, lists that she is a trauma-informed therapist. And she is. But I wouldn't want to go to a therapist to deal with trauma if they weren't truly a trauma-informed therapist. And an Enneagram-informed therapist needs to mean a lot because people make decisions based on what you say. An Enneagram-informed coach needs to really mean something. And so I think the way I would speak into the bigger question is to say this. Richard Rohr teaches me still many, many, many things. And he says, information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. And I don't think you can be a responsible Enneagram teacher or coach based on information. I think you can maybe start that with a good bit of knowledge, which means you've taken in the information and not just written it down, but you actually have owned it and you know what it means. But wisdom comes when you put that information to work in the world and then you learn from what it gives back to you. You and I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that you have 2 adopted sons and that one is on the spectrum and that you have an idea of what his number might be. That's important work. That's really important work for you to do and for you to know. Because adoption is its own trauma. And being on the spectrum is its own challenge. And parents who are parenting children like your son with the gifts that he has and with the complications or the complexity need somebody like you to say, here's what we learned. After you learn it, not here's what we suppose or here's what we think. And as I said, I've been learning from people in the room where I'm teaching for a very long time. And they've taught me at least half of what I know. I didn't just get it somewhere. I learned from saying, I think this might be true. What do you think? So I'll give you one more example and then I'll stop talking about this. Can you tell I feel strongly about this? I now have cohorts that last for 1 year, and people come for 4 times in a year, long weekends. And I have 2. I'm doing an Enneagram and family systems cohort with Dr. Andy Stoker, who is a family systems scholar, because I'm not. I have my Enneagram cohort. Joe does a contemplative cohort that includes Enneagram, and one of my apprentices teaches that with him, and former apprentices. And I'm starting a new cohort. The last Enneagram cohort I had from last year, so 2022 cohort, I asked them if they would keep coming back to teach me, because actually it was 2021 cohort. I'm sorry. If they would keep coming back to teach me, because they were the last cohort that I had coming out of COVID. And I had a theory. And my theory was that subtypes changed during COVID. And did people notice that? And did they primarily change to social because people were lonely? Or to self-preservation because people were afraid and knew that they had things to work on? Or sexual or one-to-one because they were with one person and that was very rewarding? Like, I don't know the answer to that question, and I want to be able to speak to that. So we just got together a year later for them, and they had a lot to teach me. And of a long weekend, I taught for 6 hours, and the rest of the time they taught me and one another. And we decided that we're not ready to teach anything about subtypes and cohort until we wait another year. That's how you get to wisdom.
We receive that, Suzanne. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Phenomenal advice. I think it goes along with, in parallel with spiritual formation. It's an oven. It's a slow cook process versus a microwave approach that tries to learn and teach fast. And really, that's, after doing a deep dive of the history of the Enneagram, seeing Claudio Naranjo with the SAT groups, really wanted to teach it orally in small groups. And that's one of the reasons he didn't want it to get out was because of what's happened. And so that's good to see you modeling that in your stories and kind of peek behind the curtains to see how you're doing that. That's so helpful for us.
Russ Hudson and Richard Rohr and I were all speakers at a conference about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or 9. COVID messed up all my memory. So I don't know how many years it was, but a good while ago. And they were teaching me that they had a concern that they picked up from those who taught them. And Russ Hudson was in the Gurdjieff school, so he's way back. And their concern was that what has happened would happen, and that there would be trendy Enneagram. At the time, we didn't know to examine that concern in relationship to social media, because social media hadn't taken off like it has now. And it's not that we don't want everybody to know about the Enneagram and everybody to have access to the Enneagram, because of course we do. But it's wisdom. It's not information. And it's really helpful if you know what you're doing.
That's so good. Well, in our last 15 minutes or so, Suzanne, because of your decades of working with people and because of your second book that you came out all on relationships, and because you're a type 2 and are just so naturally attuned to relationships, I would love for you to share with those watching maybe one thing for each type that they can be mindful of or work on that you think would be like make the biggest difference in cultivating healthy relationships in their life. So maybe one thing that you think, could make all the difference if they take it seriously. Okay. And you can start with type 1s. You can start with your own type 2, the heart triad, and work your way around however you want to do it.
Well, I don't start with 1s very often, but I can with this question, so I think I will. The one thing that I would say is that 1s need to ask themselves, how much is your desire for perfection affecting the people around you and affecting your relationship with the people around you? Can I say 2 things?
Yeah, 1 or 2.
Okay, thank you. The second thing is recognize that your critic, your inner voice, your critic that you hear all the time is a third person. It's a third voice in relationships. And you need to share that with people because they don't know where things are coming from if you don't.
That's good. That's so good.
2s. It's interesting to me because 4s say to me a lot, I always feel like I'm either not enough or too much. And I have so much compassion for that. And then I realized that it's because half of it is a concern for me as a 2. Mm-hmm. In intimate relationships, meaning the people closest to me, my children, the people they're married to, my grandchildren, and in particular, Joe, it's possible for me to love them too much. And for me to be too willing to express that love for them through suggestions or answering questions they haven't asked yet, or Joe sometimes just needs more space as a 9 than I need as a 2. And that's a 2 problem. We need to work on not being more for the people we love than they want us to be. The second thing I would say for 2s is I think it's really important that you recognize that you don't feel your own feelings, but you feel other people's feelings. And so in a 1-to-1 relationship, when you're picking up on somebody else's feelings and then you feel them, so you feel their feelings, be careful that your motivation is to help them and not so that you can feel something different. Because lots of times we get into something and we problem solve for other people when they haven't asked us to, because we don't want to feel their feelings anymore. And that's not good. Since I'm a 2, I could give you 45 examples, but we'll move on.
That's good. I think people should latch on to that idea of too much, because we're all blind to the fact that we can have too much of the thing that we really want, and it causes us to sacrifice other things.
Exactly.
So for me, it's type 3. Let's go there next. Too much efficiency, too much work.
That works. But the thing I would say first, and you're doing really good work. So I really hope you'll listen to this and everybody can listen in while I say this to you. 3s have a tendency not to stick around for when the confetti falls. Whether it's working on a project with your family at home or working on a project with colleagues, you are so good at setting goals and then reaching them that you sometimes don't bring along the people you love the most, or you don't wait until the confetti falls when there is success that is being celebrated by the people who were involved in the goal that you're trying to reach. So just remember, if there's going to be confetti, stay with your people, whoever they are, your sons, your family, the neighborhood book study. Stay till the confetti falls and then go on to the next thing. The second thing I would say is that it is really to your advantage in most areas of your life that you are personable, but not personal. In many of your relationships, that's kind of not fair. Because if you want people to be personal with you, then reciprocity is kind of important in that.
I wish I would have heard that in my premarital 16 years ago, and as I was starting my pastoral journey, because it's so easy to turn on the type 3, performing and be personable with people that I'm counseling at church, and just that reciprocity. That's huge. So good. We'll keep moving here. It's to type 4s.
The first thing I would say is that I know that relationships are of primary importance to you, and they always will be. That's not going to change. And so for 4s, if we just said ultimately relationships are everything, then the first thing I would comment on is that you tend to want to go too deep too fast. And so you need to pay attention to how people are responding to you. Are they backing up from you? Or are they uncomfortable because of what's happening? And then think about yourself, think about what you're saying, how you're saying it, how intense it is or isn't, and see if it wouldn't help if you shared that over having coffee 3 times instead of the 3rd time you have coffee. And the other thing is 4s have been coming up to me for years, especially college age 4s, saying, nobody gets me. And because I'm a 2, back in the day when I had first started teaching the Enneagram, I used to say to them, well, it's going to get better. But it's not going to get better. People don't get you, and they're not going to. So you have a responsibility to teach them how you see. Your Enneagram number for all of us is determined by how you see. And you can never change that. You can change what you do with how you see, but you can't change how you see. So 4s are going to have to figure out a way to read the room and know how people are responding and give people some space to catch up with where you want the relationship to go. And people aren't going to get you. And if you find 1 or 2 people who do, then that's fabulous and a great thing. And be mindful that they see differently than you do. The third thing I would say for 4s, I know I'm cheating, is that you put so much beauty in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Amen.
desperately need it. We desperately need it. So don't give up any of that creativity in music, poetry, prose, writing books, painting, I don't know, all the things you do. Don't give up that beautiful creativity for any of the day-to-day stuff that's calling you. Just don't do it.
Well, because I have a strong 4-wing, I receive that as well.
Good.
I'll take all that. That's so good. I have a bullet point list of all my failures and trying to be overly romantic in my early years, but we'll save those for later.
Let's don't call them failures.
Okay.
Let's just say places where I either misunderstood or was misunderstood.
I'll receive that as well.
Yeah, good.
Type fives.
The first thing I would say is too often you're observing life rather than participating. And participation is the whole deal. It's the gospel stories are all about participation. Paul is all about, if you're not going to participate, then you don't see many observers who are really exciting as you learn about the ways that we could do life together. And I would also say, I get it that you have a diminishing amount of energy as you go through every day. Be careful not to waste too much on gathering information that you'll never use. And instead spend it learning from other people in conversation and in relationship. And it doesn't have to be a deeper relationship than you want. The second thing I would say for fives is my mom was a five, and she was really quite something. I didn't know the Enneagram until she was, I guess, in her mid 80s, maybe 80s. And in her fiveness, she figured out a way to do her part. My dad was a doc in a small community, 5,000 people by choice. He turned down other opportunities to do that. And my mom was the doctor's wife. And for a five, that's hard. It's like being a pastor's wife in some ways, also hard. And she figured out a way to do it by going slow and by making space for different people on different days and in different weeks, so that she expanded her relationships without depleting so much energy that she felt more vulnerable than she could handle. And the second thing is fives tend to want to know about you, and they don't want you to know about them. And that's just not okay. That's not a fair way to be in relationship. So don't ask questions of people that you're in relationship with that you're not willing to answer if they ask them back to you. You want to speak to that?
So no, I'm just going to keep letting you get out of the way and keep letting you teach. But I've never heard some of those points before. And my mother's a five as well, and loved what you just shared. So good. Type 6. My wife's a type 6, so
I think there are more sixes than any other number. Sorry. I think there are more sixes than any other number on the Enneagram. And I'm very thankful for that, because sixes are most concerned about the common good. And we certainly need that. Sixes are also the people who do the stuff behind the scenes that other people don't want to do. And they seldom get credit for that. And I don't love that reality. So I think we can all try to do better in relation to sixes in that way.
Amen.
Having said that, I would say to sixes, you are not good at knowing how long something is going to take. You don't know how to prepare your time well because you think you can get more done than you can, which leaves you behind a lot of the time and with a list. And sometimes your list of the things that you still need to do gets in the way of relationships that you need to build. So I would suggest that when you have a list of 7 things that you want to accomplish in a week, take one thing off the list. And that'll give you a little breathing room for the other 6. The other thing I would say is that we're losing our ability to build community as a culture. And you're a community kind of person. So start modeling community in the ways that you can. And one way that will make you feel very vulnerable, but I challenge you to do it anyway for the sake of relationships. One way would be for you to share with people that you're in relationship about the communities that you belong to, so that they will initiate community experience for themselves. We are isolating ourselves to the point where we only spend time with people who think like we think and say the things we say. And 6s have space for difference once they get in community, primarily because of the next thing I'm going to say, which is something that I will hope you will work on. And that is when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, you don't trust yourself. And you need to. We all trust you. And when you don't trust yourself in relationships, that means that sometimes you're not saying what is yours to say and you're not doing what is yours to do.
So good, Suzanne.
Yeah. Thanks.
What would you say to 7s, and including Joel, who's with you as well?
7s. The first thing I would say is stop. Just stop. You think so fast and you have so many ideas and you're so creative and so capable. And it's great. And you need to stop. Stop and read. Stop and think. Stop and do a contemplative spiritual practice. Stop. Because once you do, you will not only see the goodness of what you bring to relationships, but you'll see the things that you bring to relationships that are hard for other people to accommodate. And the second thing I would say is, you may not know this, but we rely heavily on you. We enjoy you when you come in the room. We're glad you're here. You uplift our spirits. You make us feel more hopeful. And one of the responsibilities that goes with that is that you also understand that when you're doing something out of a sense of duty that you don't want to do, it sucks the air out of the room. So you can't fool people that you want to be there. You don't have that in you. So be careful about signing up for things that are dutiful. And if you do sign up, then you may need to fake it to make it a little bit so that everybody else can figure out how to manage the loss of what you usually bring. One-on-one, one with 5, one with many.
So good. So good. Type 8.
One of the things I say to 8s when I'm working on relationships is, when you're absolutely positive that you're right, you're probably wrong. And it's hard for 8s to make space for that. So I would suggest that you take a look at that. Second thing I would say is, a woman in a church staff that I taught for a number of years, who was is an 8 on the Enneagram, came in one day and she said, I had an all-day workshop with them, and she said, well, Suzanne, I want to talk to you about something, because I had the weirdest thing happen. My friend who never takes me to coffee and never buys coffee invited me to go to coffee, and she paid for it. And she said the weirdest thing. She said, if the drum major is too far ahead of the band, the music sounds terrible. What in the world do you think that means? So I told her, and here's my shortened way of saying that. You can't lead a group that you don't belong to. So find a way of belonging, and then you can step into leading. And then here's the third thing, which you'll just dismiss, I'm sure, but it's the best of all. It's for every number. Saved it to say to you, because I think the change is often, and the transformation is often most apparent in you. And that is, learn contemplative prayer from somebody. I would suggest that you learn it from Joe Stabile. He teaches it. I think he's the best. And you can get it on our website, MP3s. You can get it on the table. You can get it all around. Those of us across the board, all numbers, who are not doing a contemplative prayer, like a 20-minute sit a day, are not who we could be. Period. And when eights give in to that ritual of doing a 20-minute contemplative set every day, early in the day, it changes everything. And that's a big statement, and I know it is, and I'm sticking with it. It changes everything. So every number needs to do that.
I love that. And then type 9s.
Most important in relationships for 9s is later is not a point in time. So all the things you say in your relationships that you're going to do later, most of them you have to be reminded over and over. So just understand that later's not a point in time. So don't say later to yourself or to other people. And if you can do it right now, then get up and do it right now. That will change your relationships. You may need a motivation behind you for doing that. So let me tell you what Joe decided to do. I had traveled, we just looked this up. The year before COVID, I was away 33 weekends that year teaching somewhere in the country, which notably is too much. And I was too old then, and I'm way too old now, but I did it. And it was hard for all of us, but it was good for LTM, hard for our ministry, but good for it. Good for the book writing that I was a part of and going to do. It was good to meet people from across the country and learn from them. But I didn't love being away from home that much, and Joe didn't love having me away from home. So he decided, as a 9 who puts things off, that whatever was written on the list that we both keep that sits on the bar in our kitchen, he was going to do those things to honor the fact that I was traveling and working. And it changed a lot for us. And now that's habit for him, to just do what needs to be done. And 9s, speak up. Sign up. You can always change your mind later. But you are the only number on the Enneagram who sees 2 sides to everything, and often more than 2 sides. And along with 6s, who I've already spoken to and about. Right now, our country and our culture needs 9 voices and 6 voices more than any other, because those are the 2 voices and the 2 ways of being in the world that will help us stop the dualistic work that we're doing. We are just dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing. And it isn't serving us well, and it's not going to serve us well. And I try not to speak anywhere without suggesting that we need to really work on that. Do you know there are more than 40,000 distinctively different Protestant denominations worldwide? How can that be? Well, that has come about because we didn't like the color of the carpet in Fellowship Hall. We didn't like that we went from little cups to intinction. We didn't like worship time. We didn't like whatever. That's not being a follower of Jesus. That's not what that's about. And it's kind of embarrassing if you lay it out like that. There's been a big discussion in our church about whether or not worship was going to be at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Used to be at 11 o'clock. For technology reasons, it was moved back to 10 o'clock during COVID. And people who went to 11 o'clock said, I'm not going to keep coming to 10 o'clock. It's time to move it back to 11 o'clock. If you don't move it back, I'm not coming to church. And people who like 10 o'clock said, if you move it to 11 o'clock, I'm not coming to church. And I can hardly bear either one. And my response to both is daylight savings time will handle the whole thing. So you'll get your way half the year. Stop. So nines, you don't generally get caught up in things like that. You see the value of both and you find a way. And we need you to speak up and we need you to model that for us. And then the last thing for nines is your presence matters. And if the people around you aren't showing you and telling you that, then ask them how your presence matters to them and tell them to please remind you, because you are the easiest number to take for granted. And I don't want that for you.
Suzanne, thank you so much for your wisdom. I've so just appreciated just getting time with you. I know that we all wish we could just, keep our mugs and just spend the rest of the day with you. But I was just thinking about how Jesus, had to, after he got done teaching, he's like, okay, I gotta get in a boat and I gotta go across the lake here. I got other things to do and other people to see and help. And so that's, I know you need to get in your boat now and you need to go to the other side and get on another podcast and continue to teach. And so thank you so much for the time that we did get with you. I just really value it. And you just have such a gentle way about you, but also a way that draws you in. And then we can hear you say, stop it. Or, and it's like, okay, yes, I need to write that down. Stop it.
Stop that. Yeah. Brian McLaren says about me, he says, people don't know. People don't know what you did to them until a day later. They go home and they think, wow, I didn't realize that she hit me over the head with that velvet hammer, he says. And so I don't know what that's about. He thinks it's because I'm from the South and because I'm old. So I hope that whatever I said tomorrow will be appreciable and usable, and that it won't feel like I overstepped in any way.
Well, you just proved your point about it being taught orally is the best way, because what you shared with us and the experience of sitting with you and being with you is much different than even reading a book. And so lesson learned. But thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
For all those who are watching, make sure to go to SuzanneStabile.com and sign up for her subscription, The Table, if you want to continue to get access like this with Suzanne. And make sure I'll put all the book links and course links below for her. But thank you so much for joining me and Suzanne to learn the gospel, to learn the Enneagram through a gospel lens, so that you can continue to transform your life and your relationships. So grace and peace to you, and we'll see you in the next session.